Daniel stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cufflinks he'd chosen with deliberate care. Every detail mattered tonight. The crisp navy suit, the polished shoes, even the faint trace of cologne meant to project quiet power. He was turning 42, but the reflection staring back at him could have belonged to a man 10 years younger. His smile was easy, controlled, almost rehearsed. From the doorway, Lila watched him. She had spent the morning decorating the house with balloons and string lights, ensuring every corner looked festive. Guests would be arriving soon. To anyone else, Daniel would seem the perfect host. Charming, magnetic, untouchable. But she noticed the small things, the way he kept checking his phone, the hesitation when an unknown number flashed across the screen. When she called his name, he slipped the phone into his pocket a little too quickly. "Everything's ready," she said softly. Daniel turned, his smile widening as if nothing were wrong. "Of course it is. You always make things perfect, Lila." She forced a smile back, but unease clung to her. Earlier, while arranging the wine glasses, she had overheard his voice in the study. Low, sharp, not the playful tone he used with her. By the time she'd stepped closer, the conversation had ended, leaving only silence. The dining table gleamed under warm lights, silverware aligned with military precision. Bottles of champagne chilled in ice buckets, their glass necks sweating. From the living room window, Lila could see the soft glow of the evening settling in. Neighbors' houses dotted with quiet lamplight. On the surface, it was a scene of celebration. Beneath it, something darker pulsed. Daniel caught her watching him and walked over, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Don't look so worried. Tonight is about us, about joy." The words were tender, but the grip on her shoulders was just a shade too firm, the smile just a little too practiced. She nodded anyway, unwilling to stir conflict before the guests arrived. As he turned away to light the candles, she glanced once more at the phone on the counter. The screen lit up briefly with a new notification, only one word visible before it dimmed again. Tonight. Her stomach tightened. The perfect illusion was already cracking. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as Lila moved through the kitchen, straightening napkins, adjusting glasses, and forcing her body into motion. Guests would arrive within the hour, and everything had to look effortless. But her mind kept circling back to the phone screen she'd glimpsed earlier. Tonight. The word lingered, sharp as a thorn. Daniel had left his jacket draped carelessly over the back of a chair in the hallway, the same jacket he'd worn to work 2 nights ago. She reached for it absent-mindedly, meaning only to hang it neatly in the closet. Her hand brushed against something stiff in the inner pocket. Curiosity tugged harder than caution. She slipped out a folded slip of paper, the faint crinkle loud in the stillness. When she opened it, her chest tightened. A hotel receipt dated 3 days ago, paid in cash. The name printed on it wasn't Daniel's. It was blank, anonymous. But the time and location left little to doubt. Her breath quickened. Images flashed in her mind unbidden. Daniel checking his phone with that hidden smile. The muffled voice behind the study door. The word tonight glowing like a signal. The sound of footsteps made her shove the receipt back into the pocket. Daniel's voice carried from the living room. "Lila, did you put the champagne out yet?" "Yes," she called back quickly, steadying her tone. "It's chilling." She hung the jacket neatly in the closet, her fingers trembling against the fabric, and closed the door with deliberate calm. Her heart thundered as if she'd just hidden a weapon. She stepped into the dining room, where the golden light from the chandelier bathed the table in warmth. Crystal glasses sparkled, silverware gleamed. Everything was perfect, at least on the surface. Daniel was busy adjusting the stereo, his expression calm, confident, completely unaware of the storm raging inside her. Lila forced her lips into a smile as he turned toward her. "Guests will be here soon," he said. "I know," she murmured, her voice softer than she intended. Daniel didn't notice the strain. He tapped a button and music filled the room, smooth jazz floating lightly through the air. But Lila's eyes lingered on the closet door, the receipt hidden inside like a ticking clock. The unease she had felt earlier deepened into something sharper, darker. Questions pressed against her chest. Who was he with? Why the secrecy? What else had he hidden? As laughter and footsteps approached outside, the first guests arriving, Lila smoothed her dress, her mind racing. Tonight, the truth was no longer just suspicion. It had weight, proof, and a paper trail, and Daniel had no idea she was holding it. The doorbell chimed, crisp and bright, pulling Lila out of her spiraling thoughts. She pasted on a smile, opening the door to the first wave of guests. Coats, laughter, warm embraces. Within minutes, the house pulsed with chatter and clinking glasses. Daniel stood at the center of it all, radiating charm. He laughed easily, his voice carrying over the music, drawing people toward him like moths to a flame. To the crowd, he was the perfect host. Confident, magnetic, a man in control of his world. Lila, standing at his side, played her role too. She poured wine, greeted friends, nodded politely at stories, but her eyes remained sharp, scanning. Every tilt of Daniel's head, every flicker in his expression felt magnified. Across the room, her gaze snagged on a tall man with salt and pepper hair, Daniel's colleague from the firm. When their eyes met, the man hesitated before offering her a polite smile. She noticed the way his voice dipped lower when speaking to Daniel, their conversation marked by brief, clipped sentences, as though coded. Daniel's laugh came too quickly, too loud, covering something else. He glanced toward her then, almost reflexively, before shifting his body slightly to shield his words. Lila's stomach twisted. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. There was something real here, something simmering beneath the polite exchanges. "Everything's wonderful, Lila," a friend gushed, tugging her attention back. She nodded, murmuring thanks, but her ears stayed tuned to Daniel. The colleague's hand brushed Daniel's arm in a gesture that looked casual but carried weight, like an unspoken warning. Daniel stiffened, his smile faltering for just a second before he recovered, lifting his glass in a toast. To anyone else, it was nothing. To Lila, it was everything. The room buzzed with warmth, jokes, stories, music filling the air. Yet she felt the edges of the night tightening, pressing in. She caught her reflection in the mirror above the mantel, a poised hostess in a shimmering dress, smiling as though nothing in the world was wrong. But beneath that mask, her pulse raced, her mind replaying the hotel receipt, the hushed words, the tension. Daniel raised his glass higher, commanding the room's attention. "To new beginnings," he declared. The cheer that followed rang hollow in Lila's ears. The laughter from the living room swelled like a tide, muffled by the thick oak door of Daniel's study. Lila slipped inside quietly, her heels clicking once against the polished floor before she shut the door behind her. The study smelled faintly of leather and Daniel's cologne, an aura of order and power. But the silence here felt different, thicker, almost watchful. Her hands trembled as she pulled open drawers, rifling through papers, neat stacks of files, and clipped business documents. Everything was in its place, too tidy, almost staged. Then in the bottom drawer, pushed slightly behind a ledger, she felt it. A plain manila envelope, unmarked. Lila froze. The weight of it in her hands was undeniable, heavier than paper should be. She slipped it open with shaking fingers, and the world tilted. Photographs spilled out first. Daniel, unmistakably him, his arm around a woman she didn't recognize. The woman's smile was bright, intimate, the kind reserved for someone trusted. One photo showed them leaving a hotel, Daniel's hand resting at the small of her back. Another caught them at a restaurant, heads bent close, glasses of wine between them. Her chest constricted as she shuffled through the images, each one another blow. Beneath them were documents, bank transfers, offshore accounts, cash withdrawals. Numbers lined the page like damning confessions. The words leapt out, illicit, laundering, concealment. These weren't just signs of betrayal, they were crimes. The floor beneath her seemed to shift. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling the sound that threatened to escape. The man she thought she knew, the devoted husband, the magnetic host in the next room, was a stranger cloaked in lies. From beyond the study walls came an eruption of laughter, Daniel's voice ringing above the rest, smooth and commanding. It mocked her now, every syllable a reminder of the mask he wore so flawlessly. Lila gathered the photographs and documents, sliding them back into the envelope with deliberate care. Her reflection in the glass cabinet caught her eye, her face pale, eyes sharp, lips trembling. But beneath the fear, something hardened. The evidence burned in her hands, Not just proof of infidelity, but the unraveling of a life built on deceit. She knew she couldn't bury it, couldn't tuck it away and pretend. The party roared on, but inside her a storm was brewing. She straightened, clutching the envelope. Tonight would not end in silence. The party reached its crescendo. Music throbbed faintly in the background. Glasses clinked, and Daniel's friends and colleagues gathered in a loose semicircle around him. The dining table gleamed under the chandelier, covered in champagne flutes and half-eaten desserts. Daniel stood at the center, radiant with charm, basking in admiration. Lila entered quietly from the study, the envelope pressed firmly against her side. No one noticed the tension etched on her face. She moved like a shadow threading through the warmth of celebration. Her pulse hammered in her ears, every step heavier than the last. Daniel raised his glass. To 42, he began, his voice smooth, resonant, magnetic. To family, to friends, to the years behind us, and to the brighter ones ahead. Tonight, I celebrate not just age, but all of you who make my life so full. Applause rippled through the room. Lila felt her throat tighten. The words were poison disguised as honey. She could almost hear the photographs whispering in the envelope, begging to be seen. She stepped forward. "If I may," she said, her voice steady but low. Heads turned. A hush fell across the table. Daniel's confident smile faltered just slightly. Lila lifted her glass. "To truth," she said. Her eyes locked on Daniel's, unwavering. "Because sometimes what we celebrate hides what we refuse to see." She set the glass down, then placed the envelope on the table with deliberate slowness. The guests leaned forward, curiosity flickering. Daniel's jaw tightened as she pulled out the photographs and receipts, spreading them across the linen cloth like cards in a game no one wanted to play. Gasps fractured the silence. The images told their story without words. Daniel's arm around another woman, the hotel receipt, the bank transfers. Lila didn't need to explain. "Every photo, every number was an accusation. What is this?" whispered one of Daniel's colleagues, his voice strained. Daniel's mask cracked. He forced a laugh, brittle and thin. "This is absurd." "A misunderstanding." "Lila, really?" Her gaze cut through him. "Tell them it's not you. Tell them these aren't your hands, your accounts, your lies." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with disbelief. Guests shifted uncomfortably, torn between loyalty and horror. Champagne glasses trembled in hands. Daniel's composure frayed. He slammed his glass down, liquid spilling across the table. "Enough," he hissed, his voice low but sharp. "You don't know what you're doing," but he was wrong. She did. Lila's chest heaved, her fear giving way to clarity. For years, she had watched him manipulate, charm, and control. Tonight, she reclaimed the narrative. "This," she said, her hand resting firmly on the damning photographs, "is who you are. And tonight, everyone will see it." The silence that followed was not empty. It was devastating, the sound of an image collapsing. Daniel's world, so carefully constructed, fractured before his very eyes. And there was no going back. The house was silent now, emptied of laughter, drained of music. The last guest had slipped out, murmuring excuses, leaving shattered champagne glasses and whispers of scandal behind. Lila stood in the dining room, her hands still trembling. The damning photographs scattered like broken glass across the table. The sound of footsteps cut through the quiet, heavy, deliberate. Daniel emerged from the hallway, his face flushed, jaw tight, the smile he once wielded like armor now gone. "You've humiliated me," he spat, voice low but burning. "In my own home. On my birthday." Lila met his glare, her chest rising and falling. "I showed them the truth, Daniel." "Nothing more," he laughed, sharp, humorless. "Truth? You think this is truth? A few photographs, a receipt. You don't even understand what you've done." He stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "You've destroyed years of my work, my reputation, everything I built. For what, to feel powerful for once?" Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "To stop living in your lie." His eyes darkened. "No, this isn't about me. This is about you, your paranoia, your jealousy. You've always twisted things. You wanted to ruin tonight because you couldn't stand seeing me admired." The words cut, sharp and practiced, the same kind he had used for years. But something had shifted. Lila no longer recoiled. She felt his tactics unraveling as he spoke. "You can call it jealousy," she said, her voice steady, "but I call it survival. I won't be your pawn anymore. His fist slammed against the wall, rattling a framed photograph. Don't you dare turn this on me. You think you've won? You think anyone out there believes you? They'll forget the photographs, but they'll remember this. A wife too unstable to keep her mouth shut. The venom in his words filled the space between them. Lila took a breath, gripping the edge of the table behind her. Fear still clawed at her ribs, but beneath it surged something stronger. Resolve. You can keep lying to yourself, Daniel, she whispered. But the world saw you tonight. And there's no hiding anymore. The silence stretched. Daniel's jaw worked, his control fraying at the edges. For the first time, it wasn't her shrinking under his shadow. It was him, and the balance between them shifted. Irrevocably. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, but the house remained heavy with the residue of last night's chaos. Daniel had left early, muttering about damage control, leaving Lila in the echo of his fury. She sat at the kitchen table, the envelope before her like a wound that wouldn't close. Every photograph screamed a truth she could no longer ignore. She needed answers, answers Daniel would never give. Her hand shook as she dialed the number scrawled on the back of one of the receipts. It rang twice before a cautious voice answered. Hello? Claire? Lila asked, her voice thin. This is Lila, Daniel's wife. A sharp silence followed. Then a low sigh. I wondered how long it would take. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Lila arrived early. Her stomach knotted, watching every passerby through the wide glass window. When Claire finally appeared, Lila recognized her instantly, the woman from the photographs. She was younger, poised, but her eyes carried shadows that mirrored Lila's own. Claire slid into the seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the cafe wrapped around them, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of steaming milk. Then Claire leaned forward. He lied to you, she said softly. Just like he lied to me. To everyone. Lila's throat tightened. How long? 2 years, Claire admitted. It started as an affair, but it didn't stay that simple. He pulled me into things I didn't want to know. Money moved through accounts, business deals that weren't legal. And when I tried to leave, her gaze darkened. He threatened me. Told me I'd regret crossing him. Lila's chest constricted. She had expected betrayal, infidelity, maybe deception, but not this weight of menace, not this double life entwined with danger. He said the same to me, Claire continued, that no one would believe me, that he could ruin me. He thrives on control. He always has. The truth landed like stone on Lila's chest. The man she had defended, doubted, loved, was not just unfaithful. He was dangerous. Claire's hand brushed the table, her voice low but urgent. You need to be careful. He won't let this go. Not with you. Not with anyone who knows. For the first time, Lila understood that what she uncovered wasn't just the collapse of a marriage. It was a battle with a man whose lies had teeth, and she had just stepped into their bite. The days that followed blurred together, every hour a balancing act between fear and determination. Lila knew she couldn't carry the weight of Daniel's secrets alone. His threats lingered in her memory, echoing with every quiet corner of the house. So she made the call. Harris arrived 2 nights later, a former detective turned private investigator. His voice was gravelly, his manner steady. He listened as Lila explained, her words tumbling out with the photographs and receipts laid before him. His expression hardened. This isn't just adultery, Harris said finally. This is fraud, laundering crimes that don't stay hidden for long. If he's been moving money, others will already be watching. You've done the right thing contacting me. A flicker of relief coursed through her, but it was quickly chased by dread. Harris's words confirmed what Claire had hinted. Daniel's sin stretched far beyond betrayal. They were criminal, dangerous, consuming. Over the following week, Harris fed her fragments of truth, each one worse than the last. Falsified business accounts, shell companies, a string of embezzled funds funneled overseas. On paper, Daniel was a celebrated entrepreneur. In reality, he had built his empire on lies. Lila's nights grew restless, each discovery tightening the noose. She caught herself jumping at shadows, her phone clutched to her chest as she waited for Harris's updates. But Daniel was not blind. His once effortless charm had begun to fray at the edges. At dinner, his smile felt stretched, his laughter too sharp. He lingered by the windows at night, staring into the darkness as though expecting someone to appear. "You've been distracted," he said one evening, his tone deceptively soft. His eyes, however, held suspicion. "Is there something I should know, Lila?" Her pulse spiked, but she forced a calmness into her voice. "Just tired. Everything's been a lot." He studied her longer than necessary, then leaned back, still smiling. But the warmth was gone. Behind it lurked a flicker of paranoia, a crack in his control. For years, Daniel had orchestrated their lives like a flawless performance. But now the stage lights were shifting, revealing shadows he could no longer disguise. And Lila realized the net wasn't just closing around Daniel, it was pulling her into its tightening weave. The evening was thick with silence. Lila stood in the living room, Harris's folder heavy in her hands. Inside were documents, statements, and photographs that stripped Daniel's life bare. His empire a scaffold of lies ready to topple. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage waiting for its final act. Daniel entered with his usual flourish, keys tossed on the table, jacket shrugged off. But his eyes caught the folder and his smile faltered. "What's this?" he asked, voice measured, cautious. Lila didn't move. "Evidence. Everything Harris uncovered. Your accounts. Your shell companies. The money you stole. The lies you fed me." His laugh was brittle, hollow. "So you've been busy. Hiring investigators behind my back?" He stepped closer, his voice sharpening. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I finally opened my eyes. She held the folder against her chest. "You're not who you pretend to be. Not the husband, not the businessman. You're a fraud, Daniel. Criminal." His mask cracked then, his charm dissolving into something darker. He advanced, eyes blazing. "You think anyone will believe you? You think they'll listen to the bitter wife desperate for revenge? I'll tear you apart before I let that happen." Lila's breath hitched, but she stood her ground. "They will believe me. Harris has the proof. It's already out of my hands." For a moment his expression froze, shock flashing across his features before fury consumed it. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling glasses. "You think you're safe because you've got a file? You're playing a game you don't understand." Her voice trembled, but the words came sharp. "No, Daniel. It's you who doesn't understand. Your lies are collapsing, your life is unraveling, and you can't charm your way out of it anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. His breathing was ragged, his control shredded. The man who once commanded every room now looked cornered, desperate. "You'll regret this," he whispered, his voice low, venomous. "You've ruined me, and I won't go down alone." Lila's hands tightened on the folder, fear coursing through her veins, but beneath it a steady pulse of resolve. "Then we'll both go down with the truth. But at least I'll be free." For the first time, Daniel had no reply. His empire, his marriage, his carefully constructed mask, all teetered like a fragile house of cards. And tonight, it began to fall. The morning Daniel was arrested. The sky was gray and heavy, as if the world itself anticipated the fall. Lila stood by the window, hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee, watching police cars idle at the curb. Harris had kept his word. The evidence was airtight, delivered into the hands of those who would finally act. When the officers led Daniel out in handcuffs, his composure had cracked. No polished smile, no confident stride. His eyes darted wildly, searching for someone, anyone, to believe his innocence. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, their whispers like a low hum of betrayal. For years they had admired him. Now they turned away. Inside, Lila exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. It wasn't triumph she felt, but an aching void, relief laced with sorrow. The man who had once been her partner, her confidant, had become a stranger she'd unmasked. In the days that followed, Daniel's empire disintegrated. Business associates severed ties overnight. The companies built on falsified accounts collapsed under scrutiny. Colleagues who once toasted him at parties now denied ever knowing the depths of his corruption. Friendships evaporated. His name, once polished and respected, became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed voices. The house felt quieter with every day that passed. Lila wandered through the rooms, each one holding echoes of laughter, lies, and carefully staged perfection. She boxed up framed photos, not out of anger, but out of necessity. She could not heal while staring at a ghost. Claire reached out once, her voice shaking as she offered both apology and solidarity. "We're free of him now," she said softly, though both women knew freedom came at a price. Harris checked in periodically, his tone professional but kind. "You did the right thing," he told her. Lila nodded, though the words sometimes felt hollow. Justice was done, yes, but justice didn't erase the scars. At night, Lila often found herself lying awake, haunted by the memory of Daniel's last words to her. "You'll regret this." They echoed in the stillness, not as a threat, but as a reminder that even victory carried its shadows. And yet, as weeks turned into months, something shifted. She took walks in the early morning light. She picked up old hobbies abandoned during the years of silence and suspicion. She began to write again, fragments of thoughts, letters never sent, pages that stitched pieces of herself back together. Healing was slow, uneven, but it was real. One evening, standing in the backyard beneath a fading sunset, Lila allowed herself a fragile smile. The world was no longer painted by Daniel's deception. The truth, however painful, had given her something he never could: the chance to rebuild, to breathe freely, to choose her own path. The echoes of betrayal would remain, shadows of a life burned down. But from the ashes she was learning to rise, and for the first time in years the future belonged to her.